Hi viewers and welcome to Basic Chemistry 1. Today we are going to talk about ions and different types of ions, that is cations and anions. First of all, we will have a look at what an ion is. An ion can be defined as a particle, whether it is an atom or a group of atoms, that carries an electrical charge, positive or negative, due to the loss or gain of electrons is called an ion. For example, the well-known ions are sodium ion, fluoride ion, similarly calcium ion, etc. Charge on an atom. We know that an atom has equal number of electrons, that are negatively charged particles, and protons. That is the number of electrons in orbits and the number of protons in the nucleus in an atom, they are equal. So negative charge is equal to positive charge. That is why atom is a neutral particle, that it has no net charge. For example, in an atom of sodium, we know that there are 11 electrons and 11 protons, and in an atom of chlorine, there are 17 electrons and 17 protons. As I have depicted here, you can see that 11 protons in the atom of sodium, and similarly it has 11 electrons in its orbits. 2 electrons are in the first orbit, 8 electrons in the second orbit, and 1 electron in the third orbit. So it is a neutral particle. Similarly, you can see in chlorine there are 17 protons, which are positively charged particles, and there are 17 electrons in its orbits. You can count them. So chlorine atom is also a neutral atom. Can an atom acquire charge? Yes, an atom can lose or gain electrons, and in this way the balance between the number of electrons and protons is disturbed, and hence an atom acquires a net positive or negative charge. In case of losing electron, it acquires a positive charge, and in case of gaining electron, it acquires a negative charge. Then on the basis of losing and gaining electrons, we can say that ions are of two types, that is cations, which are positively charged ions, and anions, that is negatively charged particles. So to remember, I can tell you a trick or a technique. The T in cation is somewhat like plus. So you can remember from this T that cation is a positively charged particle. Anion, you can memorize the negative charge of anion. You can split this name anion in three main parts: A, negative ions. Similarly, anion, and minus. The number of alphabets are equal in both of them. In minus has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 alphabets. Similarly, anion has 5 alphabets. So in this way you can remember or memorize that cation is a positively charged particle and anion is a negatively charged particle. So let us talk about cations. How can a cation can be defined? An atom or group of atoms that acquires a net positive charge due to the loss of electrons from its valence shell is called a cation. We will talk about simple ion, that is a cation that is made up of only one atom. We will go in detail of it. Cations can also be defined as a positively charged species, whether it is an atom or a group of atoms, is called a cation. For example, sodium ion, hydrogen ion, magnesium ion, ammonium ion, hydronium ion, etc. All of these are positively charged ions, as they have lost 1 or 2 electrons. You can see here I have depicted the sodium ion. You can see that it has lost the electron, with the single electron in its third shell. Similarly, calcium ion is formed when calcium atom loses the 2 electron present in its fourth shell. So you can see that I have depicted here, this is the sodium ion and this is the calcium ion. Sodium ion has single positive charge, and calcium ion has double positive charge. Formation of cations. So as I have told you earlier that cations are formed by the loss of electrons. For example, hydrogen has only 1 electron in its outermost shell, which is also its first shell and last shell. So when it loses this electron, it forms a cation, hydrogen ion. Similarly, sodium, you know well that it has 2 electrons in its first shell, 8 electrons in its second shell, and 1 electron in its third shell. So when it loses its electron present in its last shell, it acquires a positive charge, because the number of electron now remains 11 and the number of protons the number of electron becomes 10 and the number of protons are 11. So in this way it acquires a net positive charge. When magnesium loses its 2 electron present in its last shell, it forms a magnesium double positive charge. Similarly, in case of potassium, potassium has lost 1 electron in its last shell. When it loses this 1 electron, it acquires a positive charge. Remember that the number of electrons is less than the number of protons in a cation. For example, here you can see that sodium has 11 protons and 11 electrons, 1, 2 and 8 electrons in the second shell and 1 here in the third shell. So it has a total number of 11 electrons. When it loses the electron present in the last shell, so the number of proton remains 11 and the number of electron becomes 10. So the number of electrons is always less than the number of protons in a cation that is a positively charged ion. Similarly, here you can see that when calcium ion loses its 2 electrons present in its last shell, so it acquires a double positive charge, and you can see here that now the number of electrons are less than the number of protons in it. A calcium atom has 20 protons and 20 electrons, but a calcium double positive ion has 20 protons and 18 electrons. Now let us talk about anion. What an anion is. An atom or a group of atoms that acquires a net negative charge due to the gain of electrons is called an anion. For example, or we can say that a negatively charged species, whether it is an atom or a group of atoms, is called an anion. For example, well-known ions are negative ions are fluoride ion, chloride ion, hydronium ion, oxide ion, similarly sulfate ions. All of them have positive negative charge, that is why they are known as anions. How the formation of anion occurs? Formation of anion occurs by the absorption of electron. When an atom acquires an electron or more than one electron, it acquires negative charge in this case and forms an anion. For example, when fluorine atom absorbs an electron or it acquires an electron, it acquires negative charge, -1 charge, so it forms a fluoride. And similarly, you can see here when chlorine atom gets an electron, it acquires a net negative charge and forms the chloride ion. Similarly, the oxygen atom can absorb 2 electrons in its outermost shell and it forms a doubly positive charge, a double negatively charged ion known as oxide ion. The number of electrons in an anion is greater than the number of protons because this negative charge comes due to the absorption of electrons in its outermost shell. Here you can see I have drawn fluoride ion. Fluorine atom has 9 protons and 9 electrons. 2 electrons in the first shell and 7 electrons in the second shell. When it absorbs or gets an electron in its outermost shell to complete its octet, it gets a negative charge and forms a fluoride ion. Similarly, here you can see that chlorine atom, it also has 7 electrons in its outermost shell. When it gets another electron from another atom, from another source, so it acquires a net negative charge, and we call this chloride ion. Formation of, here I have depicted the formation of fluoride ion from fluorine atom. You can see that fluorine atom has 2 electrons in its first shell and 7 electrons in its 7 electrons in its second shell. It has the capacity to absorb another electron. So when it absorbs 1 electron from another source, from another atom, it gets 8 electrons in its outermost shell, and the number of electrons becomes 10 and the number of protons is still 9, so it requires a net negative charge and forms fluoride ion. In this way, fluorine atom gets converted into fluoride ion. Here in this picture you can see that chlorine atom, when absorbs an electron, it also has 7 electrons in its outermost shell. When it gets an electron from another source, from another atom, so it has 17 protons and 17 electrons, Now the number of protons remains 17 and the number of electrons becomes 18. The electrons are greater in number by one electron from proton. In this way, chlorine atom acquires a negative charge, -1 charge, and chloride ion is formed. So you can see that here, you can see that the number of electron is greater in an anion than the neutral atom, the respective neutral atom from which this anion is formed. Here in this picture you can see that oxygen atom has six electrons in its outermost shell. When it gets 2 electron or it absorbs 2 electrons, the number of proton in it is 8, which is also 8 in the oxide ion, but the number of electron becomes 10. So the number of electrons is greater than the number of protons by 2 electrons. That is why the oxide ion has -2 charge, and in this way oxide ion is formed. And here you can also see that the number of electron is greater than the number of electrons in the concern or in the respective atom from which the anion is formed. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you will have enjoyed this video. Thank you.